Hotep everyone, and welcome back to Power Sessions with Natasha. Today I wanted to talk about something really special, something really important to us as Black people, which is our hair. This beautiful crown that we wear, something that seems so simple like hair, is not so simple to Black people because Black hair has gone through the most. Black hair is just not an insignificant part of the body. It is so much more than that. Our significance of our hair is so special, and this video is going to go into so many things. From the 15th century, Africans deeply revered their hair, and it was like a source of pride, power, and most importantly, identity. We know that our hair was very important because from all the diaries and articles that European explorers and travelers wrote about our hair, when they were trading with different kingdoms and different people, they kept very detailed notes about how they were amazed and astounded by African hairstyles. Just by looking at us, they were astounded. The different hairstyles they were seeing and encountering in their trading or, visiting the continent, they knew that these hairstyles meant something. Remember this part, that these were significant and that the hairstyles actually meant something. They had messages like the people's identity, their place in society. Everything could be told through a hairstyle. And with the hair, it just wasn't women who had these hairstyles. For example, there were hairstyles, designated to young men who were going to war or men going to war. There was hairstyles designated for the chief or the person who was powerful, who was in power. The more powerful a person was in society, the more elaborate their hairstyle would be, and therefore most of the societies had men who were chiefs, so they would have these elaborate hairstyles. So in essence, the men have probably had the more elaborate hairstyles. One French explorer by the name of Jean Balboa said he had seen so many different African hairstyles that he was really impressed by their grandeur. He also spoke of a particular tribe, I think it's a tribe from Sierra Leone, and the men's hairstyles. He wrote that they wear their long locks of hair plaited and twisted, which they adorn with palm oil and red earth. And he said that this hair, they would take the hair off their wives, which they would cut off and tie, in this way, end to end, and fix it on their heads. Some let it hang down, others, turn it up. So there were tribes who practiced this whole cutting your wife's hair and attaching it to your own hair and all of that. Our hair has always been a visual marker, and because always been a visual marker, the hair rested on the highest elevation of the human body. This made our people believe that the hair was a vessel where messages from the divine, from the gods, would be received, therefore making the hair more sacred, more precious, and more potent when you really look at it. You can just imagine the hairstyles. The hairstyles were not simple, and because the hair was so adorned and revered and took a long time to do, nothing has changed. It was known that you would protect your hair, including when you sleep. You would not just, destroy the hairstyle. It's taken a long time to do. It's beautiful. It's adorned. We have a picture here of a headrest. These were used so that you didn't mess up your hair. They are still used today, actually. The hair was a sense of divinity, a divine part of the body. Because of that, it was considered powerful. Our hair, this hair, that many love to hate, is powerful hair. Because the hair was so significant, so special, you wouldn't just allow anybody to touch or do your hair, which is what we still do now. They were really recognized hairstylists, and they would be considered craftspeople. They were the designated people who would only be allowed to do hair as hair was so divine. It sounds so very familiar today, because today we just don't let anybody touch our hair or doing our hair or putting their hands in our hair. Nothing much has changed. It may just sound like common sense, but there is some ancestral remembrance, ancestral encoding in us. This hair is our crown and glory. Sometimes we ask ourselves as Black people, how come we've been doing this for a long time? Yes, the history. You could recognize who was a chief. You could recognize who was in mourning, who was from a neighboring tribe that you probably respected and made alliances with. Everything was in the hair. This spiritual relationship with Africans and their hair continues today. It is part of our legacy. It's part of who we are. It's part of our story. So let's look at what happens next. What happens to this relationship? This relationship of our hair, it gets severed and gets destroyed, because when Africans were taken to a new world, which is the Americas, the Caribbean, South America, one thing slave owners did before boarding their cargo or slaves on the ship was to cut off their hair. Remember how we said earlier on how we found detailed journals and diaries about African hair from the same Europeans. So you can't tell us or tell me that they didn't know what they were doing by cutting the hair off. They would say, oh, it's for hygiene purposes, it's for cleanliness, but essentially what they were doing, and they knew they were doing this, was taking away a person's identity and stripping it away. They were taking away any ability for these people to recognize one another, to feel as that their whole identity was literally sawn off their heads. It was a process to further nullify a person's individual existence, and turn the African people into a faceless mask of chattel slaves that were not only not considered as humans anymore, they were not unique individuals anymore. They were commodities. It was part of the process of the stripping of the African's identity. These are some tools just on the picture here to show you how intricate the hairdressing was. These pictures, these tools show that, it was a work of art, and it just shows how precious our hair was considered. The only time a person would not have a hairstyle, particularly a woman, she was considered insane, literally mad. You would never be seen without a hairstyle, ever. So once Africans were brought to the New World, hair cut off, no identity. From the time that Africans were brought over to the New World, hair stood in the way of assimilation. African hair refused to be tamed or subdued. They tried to brainwash the Africans to say that their hair was inferior. It was assumed that when African people went to the New World, they then took on the European standards of beauty. It happens. This was inevitable. It was always covered up. Slave owners were very intent on demonizing every aspect of their physical body that were not white. Their hair, their noses, the shape of their body, anything that was uniquely African was considered inferior. Just the horrors of it all. Psychology shows that if a person feels inferior, they are not likely to rise up, but will want to please their superiors, or spending all their time becoming like their superiors. This was a clear maneuver to keep their slaves enslaved, both mentally and physically. In almost all the writings we find of that time, Black people were described in a derogatory way, and when it came to the hair, it was often described as fur or wool, which is animalistic. There was this campaign to see black people closer to animals than human, and their hair was one of the ways it made a difference. This has come from a very long way ago, a long time ago. Even when, they had posters of runaway slaves, the poster would write, his or her wool looked like this. There was this continuous campaign to keep Africans on a lower plane than their European counterparts. Many Africans fell into this trap and belittling. Some slave owners required by law that their slaves had to keep their hair covered. Others didn't care. Many of their slaves, once they saw that it was their hair that made them inferior, they did things like to try and straighten their hair. They didn't have the beautiful tools from Africa, and they became creative. We are creative people, and use things like butter, car grease to try and smooth out their hair. They would take like a warm flannel, put it through the fire, make it warm and pull their hair. They would try to do this to their babies, their own hair. Just the ingenuity of our people. They were basically saying, well, if our hair is like wool, let's try and make our hair like theirs, since it is the standard. This wasn't people saying, I want my hair beautiful. No. They were saying, if my hair doesn't look human, that's why they beat me like an animal. That's why they take my children away. So if I can appear more human, maybe I will be treated like a human and be shown some humanity. Making their hair straight was not a matter of beauty. It was a matter of how can we survive this trauma, this tragedy. It's like I'm being treated like an animal. These are the things that make me look like an animal. So I will do whatever it takes to get my hair to look like theirs. Many black people were very successful at doing that. With true creativity, ingenuity, they were able to straighten their hair. Black men would also straighten their hair into styles of the wigs that white men were wearing at the time and cutting their hair into those styles. So it's really important to understand that the attempt of black people to approximate their own hair, their hair like white people, was not a beauty thing. It was a survival competition. It was a way of surviving for their families individually. How could they survive? People even try to bleach their skin with just toxic substances. They put they put clothespins on their noses to straighten them up. Everything that white people were demonizing them with, black people said, okay, let me try and do everything I can so you don't see me as an animal or inferior. It's really painful talking about these things, but it is the truth of where our people have come from. There was also plenty of Africans who were brought to the New World, we mustn't forget, who loved their hair. They were still very connected to their home and heritage, that they still maintained their hairstyles. The style of the cornrows or cane rows, depending on where people come from, originates back to Africa. Many people use these cornrows to draw maps and instructions to get people out of slavery, In its natural state as well, the hair, some people left it in a natural state. They will use the hair to smuggle things like seeds from their master's house to grow on their own patch, in their own vegetable patch. Many still use the hair in creative ways to survive the traumas of slavery. This has to be greatly appreciated, So the concept of good or bad hair, where does that come from? It was not, beauty ideals of this whole good and bad hair, but very much survival. concepts. You have good hair, you have bad hair. A lot of people associated good hair with light skin, but even dark skinned women or men who straighten their hair good enough would have had better privileges in terms of jobs. You could work in the big house. Your responsibilities, if you looked the part, were a little bit different. So after slavery was over, what happened to black hair? Black hair became an economic empowerment. Black hair became a real economic empowerment in the early 1900s because there was a black middle class, that was emerging, and services to cater them were emerging too. You have people like Madam C.J. Walker. She's an example of a woman who was making a lot of money on how to style black hair, creating products and revolutionizing that the black woman's hair, was not ugly. There was 200 years had gone and passed, and people were not allowed to beautify their hair. If you feel beautiful, you feel confident. Madam C.J. Walker's business was bringing the idea that black women are and should be receiving the same pampering of their hair and beauty just like their white counterparts. People somehow associate Madam C.J. Walker with encouraging black women to straighten their hair, which is absolutely false when you really look at the true history. She also didn't invent the straightening comb. She did use the straightening comb, as hair treatment and stuff. Nobody, however, can accuse Madam C.J. Walker of trying to be white or making black women look white. She made products for black women, and they in turn supported her, and she in turn created opportunities for them to be saleswomen, door-to-door sales, like a modern Avon woman. When other options of employment at that time were only to be a domestic worker for white people, black women embraced these opportunities. She was giving them opportunities. They could open their own salons, from the United States, the Caribbean. Madam C.J. Walker was not just selling her products. She was also taking the money and supporting causes like the anti-lynching campaigns. She was creating community centers in black neighborhoods. She was reinvesting her money in the black community. It must be said that she wasn't the only one doing this, because the first all-black university in America was founded by barbers who, from their money that they earned, they created the first all-black university in America. The economic footprint made by black hair products was phenomenal and undeniable, and continues today. It really continues. In addition to this success, the success indicated still underlying traumas in the black community. Because why? What we were seeing was a definite hierarchy that, black women and black men who had lighter skin with looser curls found themselves to be more successful. This trauma of the light skin and the light skin look was what deemed you worthy to find a partner, get a job. You had to dress and look the part. From times of slavery, the slave owners were the ones creating this idea that blackness was negative. By the time we are getting into the 20th century, and black people had these ideals of themselves, of their hair and their skin tones, these rules and respectability politics were being upheld by black people, although it was introduced by white people, But we have to look at how black hair then became politicized, in the civil rights movement, in freeing black people. The movement, the hair, the afro became a symbol in the civil rights movement, because black people said, let's be ourselves. Let's just be ourselves. Let's not try and soften our image to make white people feel comfortable, as it's not getting us anything. Enough is enough. is what black people said. Black hair became a visual. Enough is enough. The afro became associated with black radicalism. Thanks to the members of the Black Panther who never advocated for violence, but they were doing amazing work, social work that was essential because the government wasn't doing their job or caring for the black community. That is what the Black Panther Party was doing. This afro hairstyle worldwide became the mark of a radicalist. To this day, the afro has a connotation of rebellion. You know, it conveys an unspoken message of defiance. Remember earlier on when we said that African hair had message and showed identity? That's what the afro did. It became something, and it had a message without you having to open your mouth. Our hair, we understood how powerful it can be, and we've used our hair as a tool. So what has happened to afro hair today? What has happened to our hair? Our hairstyles have become cool for white people to wear. Today we have everyone wearing our hairstyles. Wearing hairstyles traditionally linked to black rebellion hairstyles. We went from our hairstyles being rebellious to everyone in every culture wearing them and not giving us the credit. Black hair today is under attack today, but because we have so many examples. We have the example of I think there was a video that circulated on social media of a young wrestler who had to have his locks cut off. And then you have cases of young black girls being told they can't come to school or graduate for having natural hair or locks. If this hair is very much connected to rebellion. People have lost their jobs. There was a newscaster in America actually who lost her job. I can't remember her name. They said that her hair was intimidating to the audience. This is why the natural hair movement is exciting, but outside of it, it's quite depressing because our natural beauty is still shot down as unacceptable. Black hair, however, is resilient. It's beautiful. It survived slavery. It survived Jim Crow. It survived everything. It didn't just shrivel up and die. It was an economic emancipator. It continues to link us all to Africa. The centuries of trying to make us hate our hair has failed. We have beautiful hair. We have the only hair that has gravity, that grows towards the sun, towards the gods. We must love our hair, teach our children to love our hair. And black women, we must continue to love our hair. Our hair is precious. I hope you've enjoyed this video, guys. Don't forget to like the video. The likes help other people to see the video. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And I will see you on the next video. And thank you so much for watching. Bye.